I'm doing the demonstration today. I'm doing it on finishes, and I had to change my lighting around this morning because it's a lot darker. I don't have as much light coming through this window behind me as I did when I set this up yesterday. Um, I'm talking about finishes here. A lot of people have lots of questions about this museum quality finish that I use, and a lot of people ask me about lacquer too. I'm going to kind of run over and go through some of these items. One thing that I want to talk about first is the first step to a great finish is sanding. And unfortunately, all of us wood tinners, we've been taught to hate sanding from everybody. You watch these demos, everybody says the same thing. Oh yeah, we all hate sanding, and yep, ain't nothing worse to do but sand. And I kind of take a little offense with that. I don't really hate sanding. I find it just as enjoyable as the rest of the process of making a piece. Because I think when you sand, you really bring out the grain, and I think you need to embrace sanding. It, uh, it is Sanding is the second most important thing you can do with your art, in my opinion. The most important part of a turning is form. If you don't have the right form, I don't care how you sand or whatever you do, it doesn't look right when you're done. So I think form is the most important thing you can do in making a piece. I think the second most important is sanding, because if you have a horrible finish on there, which I see it posted on social media all the time, um, pieces that there's sanding marks in them, there's tool marks they didn't sand out, sanding marks that they put in because they were sanding while they had the lathe on, like the inside of a bowl, and you start burnishing the wood, and those marks are just as hard to get out as tool marks are, and people think they don't realize that they've incorporated those into their piece by sanding with the lathe on. So I just have a flat board here, but if I'm working on a board, I mean a board. If I'm working on a bowl or a hollow form, I don't sand with the lathe on. I use power tools, but I sand with the lathe off to get a nice even finish. Especially on a bowl, the inside and outside of a bowl, I don't turn the lathe on until maybe I'm up to 320. Then I might turn the lathe on and get a nice finish from top to bottom. But when you've seen my stuff, everything I do has got natural edges. It just doesn't work the sand with the lathe on anyways. But I think that's taught me a valuable lesson that uh, I can sand with the lathe off probably as fast as most people do with the lathe on, and just working my way around the whole bowl and going through all the grits. If you're sanding and you hit that 220, that seems to be the grit you hit. You hit 220, and then all of a sudden you start seeing sanding marks or tool marks that pop up down in those corners. Uh, at that point, you got to just stop and back up a grit or two and take them out, and then keep moving forward. And then the same thing happens when sometimes when you apply your sanding sealer. Suddenly, some of these sanding marks pop back up. Turning marks and sanding marks, and when your sanding sealer is dry, you need to stop back up and take those out. So sanding is one of the most important things you can do to your piece. So with that, I have a piece here that it's some ambrosia maple that I've sanded to 320. That's my process. Everything I do, I do the same thing. I sand it to 320, and then at that point, I'm going to put on a sanding sealer. Um, my sanding sealer um, is, hang on, I have a picture here, I think. Like, there's my sanding sealer. I mix denatured alcohol and shellac, clear gloss shellac. I mix it half and half. And that's my sanding sealer, and I use this on everything I do. Um, the let me get back to this. So at this point, I've gone through and I've got the sanded to 320. I don't have any marks in there, and at this point, I would put on my sanding sealer. Let me show you. Here's my sanding sealer. I mix it up, and a lot of people ask me, yeah, I tried your sanding sealer, and the next day it was all separated. It should separate. There's DNA and there's shellac in there, and you need to shake it and mix them back up. After a while, I mean, I mix up. I think I just mixed this up earlier this week, so that's what I mix up at a time, about that much. When it gets to the point where it's not separated anymore, it's because your DNA has all evaporated. and the only thing you have left in it is shellac and maybe just a little bit of DNA. So at the point where it stops separating, like tomorrow morning, you get up and after you've used it and it's not separated, you probably time to dump that into your shellac and start over again or throw it away. And I have a jar I put all my old shellac in that I use for other stuff. So, but that's probably the time to throw it out and to remix it. So at this point, I have this my piece here sanded to. Let's let this. Is a little washed out there. I might have to just shut this off. Let's go with that.
Yeah, that's better.
So I have this sanded to 320. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on my my sanding sealer, and I'm going to put this on generously over the whole thing. And I'm going to put it on until all these spots stop soaking it up. So when I sit there and wait for 20 or 30 seconds, I don't have a dry spot. You know, I don't think you can see that here. But sometimes you get these dry areas here where the spalting is, and it's drier than the rest, and it sucks it up. And I'll just sit there and I'll just keep applying it to those areas until it stops absorbing it, until the whole thing is evenly wet. And keep going through it. Now that can sometimes take a half an hour to do all that. But it's something you need to do. And then I'll stop back and I'll take a look at it and wipe it a little bit and make sure that it looks like it's that sanding sealer is drying evenly across the whole piece. Now what can happen if you're working on and I always blow in these before I seal them up. Keeps it from evaporating. I do that with all my stuff and setting up. If you've got something like this, this is one of these pieces. This is what I have done that museum quality finish on. If you've got something like this right here is all ingrain. This is going to absorb and absorb and absorb. And this whole top here, because it's ingrain, it's just going to keep absorbing it. This here, this side grain, is not going to absorb much when I put that on, my sanding sealer. So I'll put it on this whole thing, and the first thing you'll notice is here it's all dry, and up here it's all dry, and it's kind of wet here and here. And I'll have to keep applying it to these areas on the top and the insides here for sometimes a half an hour. To just keep putting it on there and keep putting it on there until it finally stops absorbing it. Because if you don't do that, I don't care what finish you put on, except maybe if you're just doing like Grand Rapids grit, some kind of a gritty polish, you're not going to notice it then. But if you're putting on anything like a lacquer or polyurethane or shellac, you're going to see the exact same thing in your piece. It's going to be nice and shiny here, and it's going to be all dull and dry in these areas. So I will keep putting on that sanding sealer. And like I said, some pieces, especially you got ingrain, you'll be sitting here doing it for a half an hour. So get the radio on and just keep going. I might walk away and let it dry a little bit and then come back and put some more on. And then when I think I'm finally there, like I just did with this piece here, I'll take I'll take a piece of paper towel and I'll dry it all off and let it set. So that's my first step for doing a every piece. Every piece I do, I get to this point right here where I've got 320 and I've got sanding sealer, and I put that sanding sealer on generously until it doesn't absorb it anymore. At that point, I let it set. If you've been putting it on for half an hour, you probably need to let that set for 2 or 3 days so that it cures. Otherwise, you're just going to clog up your sandpaper when you try to go back over it. So I'll let it set, and then a couple of days later, when I get back to it, I'll pull it out. Now, this is one that I did that to earlier this week. So it's the same wood, and it's got one coat of my sanding sealer on it. So at that point, I'm going to bring that back out a couple of days later. And so this was sanded to 320. So now at this point, I'm going to bring this to 400. What I would do, typically, I would back up to 320 again. Sometimes I might even back up to 220. Depending on how things look, how it's set up. how many really punky areas I had. I might want to back up a little bit and try to smooth out those punky areas. But on this one, it's pretty dry, so I'm going to just quickly sand this to 400. So pardon the noise. So there's 320. I'll make sure that my paper isn't getting all gummed up and gritted up, because if it's all gummed and gritted up, you're probably going to want to like run some steel wool over this to take off some of that gummy part. But if you let it dry for a couple of days, it should be hard. It shouldn't gum up your sandpaper. So, and this is not gumming up, so I know I've got a nice clean sanding job here. So that was 320, and now I'm going to throw some 400 on. And that is that. Let me blow this out, because I see I got it in the hole there. So now I'm at 400 grit. I've got my sanding sealer on there. At this point, I would come this far with every piece I do, and then decide, okay, what am I going to do with this piece? Am I going to put a poly wipe on there? Am I going to put a Danish oil on there, or am I going to lacquer it, or am I going to do my museum quality finish? I get to this point at everything I do, and then I decide, well, usually I already know, but at that point I will do the next step, because getting this far and everything is going to make that next step go on and appear so much better if you've done this whole process and gotten this nice and sealed, because this is sealed. It's extremely smooth. It feels hard. It's not going to absorb much anymore because I've already filled all the pores with my sanding sealer. So at this point, I'm going to put on my my museum quality finish. And let me let's see. I have my museum quality finish, which is mineral spirits, tung oil, and polyurethane clear. Those three mixed evenly, 1 part of each. I'll usually mix up just what I need to do the piece I'm doing. You know, and if I'm doing like that big vase there, I would probably mix up more like a cup. But if I'm just doing you know, a little piece like this, I only did a couple of tablespoons of each to do this demonstration. So I've mixed that up in a little can. I saved one of the cans from before, and so then I'll put that on. So this is my MQF, my museum quality finish with the 3 parts.
A question, Doug.
Yes.
You always use gloss on the
yes
thing? Okay.
Yes,
thanks.
you want gloss. You could put a satin in there. It'll just give it a satin finish. But the way that this is going to get put on, I can get a satin finish like that. That's kind of what's on this piece here. I did this with the gloss, but I got a satin finish because I just didn't keep applying it. You know, you can at one point you can just stop and say, hey, I like that the way it looks, and it's not too glossy. So, but yeah, it's got to be clear. And the same thing with the sanding sealer. Make sure it's clear gloss, and make sure I just did this. Make sure that when you pick it up, you don't get their sanding sealer. I accidentally bought that 2 days ago because this can was empty. So I went to buy more, and I bought the it says I don't know.
Too much light.
Too much light, yeah. It says here. I can put this here, or main.
Yeah, that's already pre-mixed.
It's pre-mixed. It's like, I mean, you can tell too. As soon as I opened it, I knew I got the wrong stuff because it's like gasoline. And regular shellac is more like the consistency of cream, you know, like a heavy milk. But it was so thin, it's like, oh, I can still use that. I just don't. You wouldn't mix it. You would use this. You would put this right straight on the way it was. So look at what you're buying. Get clear for my sanding sealer, and I use clear polyurethane for the MQF, the mix.
What
so
about
now,
wax? What about wax or no wax?
This is probably, it's probably got wax in it. I know I've seen that before where they're, oh, make sure it's the wax free and all that. I'm sure you can go to Woodcraft and find a shellac that's wax free. I just buy this from my local hardware store, you know, and that was kind of one of the things that that made me start talking about what I do, because when I see people describing these types of sealers, they're like, oh yeah, you have to use a lint-free cloth, and you have to use, make sure you're using you know, wax-free shellac, and whatever you do, don't get just your regular off-the-shelf tung oil. You know, don't get just regular tung oil like this off the shelf. You have to go and buy the pure tung oil. And it's like, you know what? I don't do any of that. I go to my local hardware store, and all these, they have all these, you know, and it's 2 miles away. I don't, it's right off the shelf, and I get a great finish by using the regular stuff I get from my hardware store. So that's why I started talking about this, you know, and they talk about make sure you got a lint-free cloth when you're doing your applying this stuff and wiping it all down. I used paper towels, and I was going to have, let me grab one here. I use paper towels. I have not bought a roll of paper towels for my shop here probably in 4 years. My wife goes through paper towels like they're free. She takes them and she lines these things out, and she lays on her eggplant or her salmon or whatever, and then she puts another whole roll on top, and then she wraps them. And at the end, she throws away paper towel like this by the mass. I just save it, I set it, I dry it out, and I reuse it. So I'm not even using clean paper towels when I do these processes. I'm using eggplant. Usually it's eggplant. This has got eggplant juices all over. She just did it the other day, and it works just fine. So I guess I'm debunking some of the things I've seen that, you know, make sure you do this and don't buy this and all that. You know what? I've done it with just stuff I've had at hand here, and it's worked just fine. And I have some nice pieces that have won me awards to prove that, you know, you don't have to get pure tung oil, and you don't have to get waxless shellac and all that. You can use what you get from your local store. So here's my shellac that I mixed up a couple days ago when I was getting ready for this demonstration. Now I've got this all sanded to 400, so, and I'm going to go with my museum quality finish. So I'm going to put this on in pretty much the same way that I would put on my sanding sealer. I'm going to put this on and make sure that it's absorbing evenly through the whole surface. And it should, if I did my last step properly, it should. I shouldn't see dry spots because I've already gone beyond that when I did my sanding sealer and I put it on there. So I put this on there and I get it nice and thick, or generous. I won't say thick, but generous. I don't want it dripping all over my leg. And make sure it's nice and sealed. If I was trying to do the end here, I would have a lot to do because that's ingrained. I would have had to lay on my sanding sealer over and over and over again. But I'm just doing this surface here. So, and it's gone on and it's nice and even and it looks good. So at this point, I go and I take, let me get the right one here. After I've got that on there and all sealed, I'm going to use this Norton Sandpaper. I get this from Woodcraft. It's a soft touch sanding sponge. I can probably put that on the screen here. They have 1000 P 800, so I'm guessing this is 800. I don't know how it would be both. So I would, after I have this ready to go, I take the 800, I cut a little piece off it, and I'm going to just sand this in lightly and go through and work it into the grain. And I don't have to do this a lot because it's not going to go very deep. But I'll go with the grain if it's possible. If it's a burl, then I just do circular motions and go around the whole piece, inside and out if it's a bowl or a vessel, and just kind of work that in until it's looking good. And then I'll take some of my eggplant paper towel, and I'm going to dry that off. And I'm not going to dry it completely, but I can dry right now, and I see I got a nice sheen here. I wish I don't know if I can see that. Hang on.
We can see some sheen, that's for sure.
Let me go this route here. Let me see if I can get this camera on here.
So while you're doing that, Ruby asked a question. She says, did I miss something? Does he mix the tung oil and the shellac?
No, the tung oil with the mineral spirits and the polyurethane. That's my museum quality finish. Those three pieces. The picture before that, that was my sanding sealer, the shellac and the denatured alcohol. So, yeah. So, yeah. Keep them straight. I have a handout that I'll email out. I was looking at it and I need to make one change to it. So let's see now if I can. Hang on, I'm moving back. Here's my, I get this camera on here. See, now here on you can see the sheen here a little bit.
Yep.
And what I would do here is kind of look at this. You can already see that it's got a nice shine to it. And this is the first step. It's all nice and even all across. So this is the first step of putting this on. This is still a little wet because I just did this. But you know, I'll get it on there and then I'll sand it in with this 800 grit foam back paper, dry it off. I'm not going to dry it. I mean, you could just keep drying it, but once you see it's got a nice cover and it's maybe just a little wet, that's good. I'm going to let that set then for I'll let that set for a couple of days until that cures, or at least a day. So that's the second step. And it's already got, I mean, that right there, that's a pretty nice finish. That's a nice soft sheen on there. You could call that, you know, you could say, hey, I like that right there. I don't need to do any more to it. So, but.
So Tom Pennington's got a question. He says, does he let it dry before sanding or wet sanding? I'm not quite sure what he's referring to.
Yes. Well, no, this paper, it was still wet. So I put the sealer on there, my MQFs, and then while it was still wet, I sanded it in. I wet sanded it in with this 800 grit foam back paper. So I sanded it all in, and until it feels like it's nice and evenly sanded. I didn't miss any areas. So I think that helps to work that. Well, it does. It definitely works it into the top of the wood grain. So you wet sand that in with this foam back paper while it's still wet. Then after you're done, dry it off with the paper towel. You know, I just lightly dried it off, and then that's step 2. So at this point, I'm done for the day on this. So I would put this away, and then in a day or two, bring it back out. So now here I got one that I have done those 2 steps to earlier this week. So this has got my sanding sealer and it's got one application of my museum quality finish on it. So now I'm going to do practically the same thing again. I'm going to get my my finish out, which I seem to have. Oh, it's right here. I get my finish out, and I'm gonna spill it all over me. But I got enough in there to finish this. So then I'm going to take this, and I'm not going to sand or anything. I'm going to immediately just put on another coat of my finish here.
Do you always apply it with a brush?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I don't. Yeah, I always put it on with a foam brush. Probably because I buy these things in like 50 packs. So I put that on, and I'm putting this on generously, and I'm looking over again, make sure I'm not missing any spots, and now I'm going to go to the next grit up on this foam back paper. This is 12 to 1500, so 1200. And I'm gonna cut a little piece off it, and I'm gonna take this 1200 now, and I'm gonna work this into my grit, into my piece. And if you can go with the grain, go with the grain. You know, once again, if you got a burl, then you're just gonna do circular motion. I don't think it really matters at this point because it's 1200 grit. You're not gonna probably see any of the lines from this. So then after I've got this worked in nicely, I'm gonna get out a piece of my my paper towel, and I'm just gonna kind of wipe this back off again until I see that it's got a nice little sheen to it there. And at this point, I'm gonna let that dry. And I can put this back up there. So you can see on here, it's got a nice sheen on there. It's got a little more of a gloss to it. So I'm gonna let that dry now. And I didn't completely take that off. There's a little bit on there. I'm sure you can see I smudge it there because it's got just a little bit of it's just got a little film of that MQF on the top. I'm gonna let that dry. And at this point, it's gonna dry about that shiny. It's gonna it'll probably soften a little bit, and then at this point, it's likely done. If you don't want to get it really glossy, if you want to get it glossy, then I would just keep repeating these last steps over and over again. I had a piece here that I think I just sold it, that I had done 4 coats after 4 of these final coats, and it was pretty glossy. And that's 4 coats like this is really going to get that glossy. Right now, this is going to dry to a really nice satin sheen, and you're done. That's it.
How much dry time do you give it?
1 day. Well, I take that back. 1 day before I put another coat on. This thing's going to stink for about a week. So before I brought it to the gallery and put it on the shelf, I would let it sit in my shop or sit somewhere where it's not going to get too dusty. You don't want it to get dusty at this point. So put it in a dust-free area and let it dry for a day. And then after that, I would let it dry for probably a week. I'd let that dry for a week before I brought it to the gallery because it stinks. You know, even though you're using odorless mineral spirits, and that's why this came from the AAW magazine. It was February like 2017 or 2018. And it's called their museum quality finish, and it's very similar to what I did here. And I forget now why I was saying this. So I blame that on COVID, COVID fog. So, but anyways, it's in the mag. What's that?
Tom Penninga wants to know if the temperature of the shop makes any difference.
It probably would slow down the drying time. I don't know if it would prevent it from drying. Right now, my shop here is, well, my shop's probably right now 62 degrees. It's pretty nice. And that's kind of where it's at most of the winter. So that's a pretty good temperature for doing any kind of a finish. But I probably, if you were getting down in the 40s or something, I'm sure that would slow down the drying time. But I don't know if it would affect the overall quality afterwards. Once it's cured, I think it would be fine.
Ruby wants to know what the proportions are of the tung oil, DNA, and polyurethane.
Even portions, 1 part of each.
Doug, when you're doing your big hollow forms or bowls, do you also do that finishing on the lathe?
Yes, I do all my finishing on the lathe. And then when I'm all done, I cut the bottom off, and then I have to finish that, which takes another 4 or 5 days, you know, to finish the bottom. Unless you're lacquering it, then you can do it pretty quick. But with this museum quality finish, you gotta cut the bottom off, and then you have to go through all those processes to get it to look the same as the outside. So you probably, you know, have another week of work to get it all up to the same. Or I have done the museum quality finish on the whole hollow form, and then lacquer the bottom. So.
When do you use lacquer? Do you use lacquer on any of your museum?
I have lacquered one of these pieces after it's cured. You know, I look at it 30 days later and like, you know, I don't like the way it looks, I'll go in and I'll put my my sanding sealer on there. I'll give it a coat of that. I'll lightly sand it in like with this 1200 sandpaper, dry it off, and shoot it with lacquer. Shellac is a great medium between everything. So I heard somebody else say that you could just put lacquer right over this after it's dry. I don't know if I've done that. I think I've always put another coat of my sanding sealer on just to ensure that I got a good bonding agent. So, and this is already starting to turn into a nice gloss. Or
Question.
Yeah.
Do you ever wear gloves for what you're doing there?
No.
Okay.
I probably should, huh?
It depends on whether you want the ends of your fingers or not.
I haven't lost the ends of any of them yet. So. But no, I don't. I just use my hands, and I mean I'm not getting this. I'm doing this. I'm not getting on my hands that much. I'm using a brush and I'm using a paper towel, so it's not. It's doesn't seem like I get much on my hands, except for when I dump the whole can over and I'm trying to grab it.
That cauliflower paper towel, you might want to put some of that in the club store so people.
Yeah, I was thinking about patenting that. Yeah, I think this is eggplant. Cauliflower, she doesn't have to dry that much, but eggplant and salmon, she has to dry all that. So, yeah, but that might be that might be a special part of my process that I don't know how much is adding to the final end game.
Yeah.
So
I would think the salmon would add a lot to it.
Yeah, I usually use the salmon more when I'm wiping off the sanding sealer as opposed to the spinal grade here. So now you can see how this is starting to dry. It's still got a nice, it's got a nice sheen to it. I would be happy with that right there and probably call it good without putting any more coats on. I think when I first was doing this, I was trying to do a final coat of just, I would just put it on there without the sandpaper, and then try to get a nice, like you would do a poly wipe probably, and a wipe on poly, and tried to get one smooth coat on there and let it dry. But I never liked the way it looked. It just never came out right. And I find that if for my last coat, I always use the sandpaper, put it on there, work it in, wipe it off, and call it good. Because I can feel this is getting tacky now. So it's starting to dry, and it's probably gonna dry with that sheen on there. So, which is, I could live with that. And then with lacquer, if I'm going to lacquer something, it would be before I did the first coat of that. I do my sanding sealer, and then I sand it from 320 up to 400, and then shoot it with lacquer, and it would be that would be good. As a matter of fact, I can do that right now. Let's take that one. Here's my number one. So this has got sanding sealer on it only. We just did that an hour or 20 minutes ago. So I can take this, and because we just did it, it might be a little tacky. So I'll just take a little steel wool, work that back off, get it nice and smooth. Hit that with some 400. Blow it off. My what I use for lacquer, let me see if you can see this from, well, I can do it with this other one here. Still on? Oh, it shut off. Hang on here. My lacquer system is this Fuji Semi-Pro. I think I bought it on sale a couple of years ago or 3 years ago maybe for $300 or something like that. And basically I bought that because it had really great ratings and it wasn't that much more than the one they sell at Woodcraft. So it's a non-bleed head. So when I turn it on, there's no air blowing through it. It feeds it when you pull the trigger. So let me shoot this real fast for the heck of it here. So let's see. When you turn this on here, I'm going to turn this on, and this thing sounds like a vacuum cleaner running. And what I do when I lacquer, I'll lacquer at the top. I'll come through and I'll like lacquer this much, and then I'll move down, and so about halfway across what I previously lacquered. So that every time I go through, I'm covering half of what I lacquered the first time. So the first time I do this, I'm going to come like half off the top, and then I'm going to move down, and then I'll come here, and I'll work my way all the way to the bottom. So I'm kind of hitting every area twice when I lacquer this. So here, let me lacquer this. So there's my lacquering. And typically what I do if I've got a bowl or something on there, I'll lacquer the outside with the bowl spinning at 159 RPMs a minute. And I've got that figured out. I got my gun adjusted that I can shoot it and I can watch it go around 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and then stop it and then move up halfway and I can go up the whole backside. And then I'll shut the lathe off. And I'll lacquer the whole inside, which if it's a really big bowl, it's a complete pain in the ass because you got overspray. You're inside of a bowl. The fumes can't get out, and they're just in there causing more overspray. So it can be a tedious process. If it's a really small bowl, you can just go right through it. So, but I'll go through that, and then when I get it where I think it looks like it's all good, I'll turn the lathe on at the slow speed I can go, which is 125. And let it spin while it's drying, and that helps prevent runs. Because I don't know if you can see that, but I put this on pretty thick, and I can see it rippling as I was going across it. So I'll always turn it on afterwards and just let it spin for a couple minutes while it dries. But that right there, that's pretty much dry right now. Let me turn this back on again here. This thing, I wish this would stay on.
So how do you determine which ones you're going to lacquer and which one you're going to do the other finish? I mean, if you're turning everything for the, shoot, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
Everything for the gallery?
Yeah.
If it's food safe, I'll use the museum quality finish because that's a food safe and it's worked its way into the grain a little bit. I mean, it's not a really... not really a convenient food safe for the consumer because if they wear through it, I mean, it could, if they scuff it up and stuff, it's not so easy to just put some Danish oil on and redo it. And if I don't want a high gloss, like you can see this right here, this is pretty glossy, and this is probably, I mean, that's probably almost dry. In another minute or so, I'll be able to touch that, and it'll be dry. That's how glossy that's going to be with just one coat of lacquer. If I don't want it really glossy, like that piece behind me, this piece here, I didn't want that high gloss on it. I wanted more of a satin finish, so I went with the other. So that's kind of how I determine that. What finish do I want? It really glossy, or do I want a satin finish? Is it going to be food safe? Most of my food safe stuff I use that museum quality finish because it is food safe once it cures after 30 days. And it still looks good. It can still be glossy and be food safe. So I can tell somebody, I can tell a customer, yeah, it's food safe. You can put food and safe in there. It's not going to hurt the bowl. It's not going to hurt you. You wouldn't want to do that with lacquer, you know. So, and if you do like before, I used to do my food safe stuff with. I would use like the Grand Rapids grit, or I would use Danish oil or something like that, and you don't get that gloss. And you know what? If you want to sell something in a gallery, people gravitate towards shiny items. They're like crows, you know. They're going to pick up the shiny things. You know, the other ones just tend to sit there on your shelf for years, you know. So let's see if this is dry. Oh, it's not quite dry. I left a little spot there. You can see that. So, but it's close. So yeah, that's kind of that's my setup. That's what I do on everything I do. It's one of those two usually, and you know, it works for me. It'll probably work for you.
Hey, Doug, got a question? It's Jim.
Yes.
The type of lacquer, you can buy the is it Watco or something like that lacquer in a spray can, but there's also an acrylic lacquer that the automotive people use. Which have you used either?
No. Here, let me grab what I use. I used to use a Valspar, and they got bought out by Valspar got bought out by Newtone here. And so I get this at the Sherwin-Williams. It's right next to Woodcraft. They used to be over on 44th Street. And they claim that this is the same as the one I was using before, but I don't think it's true. Before I was using a Valspar, and it had a ultraviolet inhibitor in it, and it helped to keep things from fading. And I think it worked because I have some box out here that I shot with that stuff like 5 or 6 years ago that's still red, sitting in our kitchen up here. And this doesn't say that it's got a UV inhibitor on it. And I can't imagine you would make a product and spend the extra time to make sure it's a UV inhibitor and not put it on the label. So I don't think it's the same as the Valspar that I was buying before. So yeah, this is what I've been using. I cut this 3 parts lacquer with 1 part lacquer thinner, you know, and I mix up, you know, probably 2 cups at a time, you know, 1.5 cups of this and then 1/2 cup of lacquer thinner. So that's my lacquer. And I had some, this is gloss. I had some satin. Before, when it was Valspar, you had to tell them what sheen you wanted. And I would get 80 sheen, which was pretty glossy. And I had like some 60 sheen if I wanted like a satin, not quite so glossy. So, but,
Hey,
yeah.
Doug, if you go to Sherwin-Williams there, and tell them you're with the other group, the Grand Rapids Woodworkers, you know,
Yeah.
you get a heck of a discount. They don't ask to see a card or nothing, but you get they're set up with them. They had a demo, Sherwin-Williams demo come in, and I forget the discount, but I bought a lot of stuff there, including my sprayer, and you get a heck of a good discount.
Okay. I know at times some guys there will give me a discount, like a pretty significant discount, and some guys don't. Most of them don't.
Tom McDonald used to live next door to the regional rep or whatever. And Tom McDonald got that set up with him. But yes, it's a heck of a discount. I think we could try to make some connections so the Turner's Club could get it without one. But you don't have to show your card, but I get everything there because the discount's unbelievable.
Okay. Well, I'll remember that next time. Any other questions? Wow, it's pretty quiet out there. Okay.
They're all dying to go into the shop and try it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, you can get all this at your local Ace Hardware. So go down there, except for the except for the eggplant paper towel. You'll have to make that yourself, or go out on a limb and just use paper towel. I don't know.
Hey, Doug, there's a
Yes.
comment. There's a comment asking if you use a Beal buffing system at the end.
I have a Beal buffing system that I bought, and I did not. I've never tried it on this museum quality finish. Basically because I like the finish when it's done, and with my lacquer, people look at that and they think that I did use a Beal buffing system on it, and it's like, no, it's just lacquer. It comes out glossy. So I have a Beal buffing system here that's pretty much been used twice, and I never use it again because I like the finish I like the finish I get. With lacquer, sometimes if I really want it shining smooth, after I do like I just did today, I'll wait a couple of days and I'll run over it with some quadruple aught steel wool and just lightly scuff it, take off the lumps and bumps, and make sure that there's no dust in the shop, and give it one more coat, and you can really get a really nice quality finish that looks like it's been buffed to the end, automotive style finish. So
Doug, also Sherwin-Williams carries the 2-part bleach, and it's terribly inexpensive. They come in gallons. You get a gallon of A gallon of B, so much less expensive than buying the little Zinsser bottles at Woodcraft.
yeah, I know you mentioned that before. I don't use that very much. I did use it last month though. So yeah, for next time I need it, that's where I'll be going to get it. So yeah, I think people don't realize that you go to a regular finish store like that. I'm sure if you went to Sherwin-Williams, what's the other one up there? I'm thinking of Kraft and 29th Street. Anyways, you get their prices is just as good as the big box stores, if not better. And you might be getting a better product. So.
Well, thank you, Doug. I've always had a hard time with finishing, and this is going to help me a lot.
Yep, give it a try. If you don't like it, don't do it. If it looks good, then there you have another weapon in your back pocket that you can use. All these demonstrations are another weapon, that you can pull out when needed to try to enhance your product. I don't try every demonstration. I don't always try every month, but I have it in my back pocket and try to remember it. So when I do need to do something, it's like, oh yeah, I think I remember we had a demo on that. I'll give it a shot. So,
Doug, on 29th Street, that's Sevens.
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of.
They carry a tremendous selection of Modern Masters reactive paint, also very inexpensive.
They're out of business.
Sevens?
Yeah.
Wow, when did that happen?
On 29th Street, that's not a Sevens anymore. And the one on Fuller isn't there either.
Okay. Yeah,
hey, Doug,
go ahead.
I learned a MQF variety from Fine Woodworking, which used boiled linseed oil in place of the tongue oil. And your comments on that?
I've heard that. I've never tried it. I think it's just a cheaper way of doing it because the tongue oil is more expensive than boiled linseed oil. I haven't tried it. I'm not an expert on oils and stuff. Seems to me somebody I heard talking about that was Jeff Hornick. I was watching one of his demos once on finishes, and it would be interesting to get him to do a demo for our club. Ron, you need to work on that for us. He is super knowledgeable on all that, knows about all the chemicals and do's and don'ts and all that. And I'm not that. I only know what I do. I don't know everything else. So he seemed to know everything else about it.
What, Doug, you want me to do John Singleton's job?
Yes.
I could have it done this afternoon if you want.
I'd be curious what he charges to do a demonstration on all his finishes. I don't know if we'd need one right away since I just did this, but maybe later next year, or maybe when you do your your Ron's retreat, and he's up here, we can get him to swing by our guild and do a demonstration for us.
I'll have it done for you.
All right. Work with John Singleton on that.
So
Hey,
the
Ron,
version
thank
with
you. I appreciate it. Now you only got 11 months to go. Hey, one finish spot that does pretty good. They mix everything there. The paint spot by Leonard and Walker, I believe it is. They're reasonable and they do all the finishes.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to find a finish that I know has a UV inhibitor in it, because I don't think this one does, and I do think that's helpful to keep the color of your piece from fading. So that's I've been looking for one of those, because I see some pieces I've done in the house that I thought, they look like they've lost their color, and those pieces that I had done before with that Velspar that listed right on it had a UV inhibitor. It seemed to hold color a lot better over time.
One thing about that paint spot too is if you got to match a color or a varnish or a stain, you take it in there and they'll match it right up for you. You take a piece of that and a piece of wood you're gonna put it on, and they'll mix a finish till they got a match for you.
Okay, cool. Okay. Well, I think we can say that this meeting is officially over with. I'll leave the room open for a little bit here so that